In Zechariah 1:14, God says, "I'm zealous for Jerusalem and for Zion with great zeal." The zeal of the Lord is His passion, His pursuit for her as a people and as a land. In Zechariah 8:2, 3 times in one verse, God speaks of His zeal for her. "I'm zealous for Zion with great zeal, with great fervour I am zealous for her." God is personally invested and heavily involved in Israel. God called forth a man, from him He birthed forth a family, from there a tribe, from which the people of Israel, and thus even a nation was born. Israel is a holy people to the Lord. She was chosen to be a people for Himself, a special treasure above all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. She was birthed forth for Himself. To her He had given the laws and commands. This was to allow them to draw close to Him. She was to be set apart from the world so that she could be near to Him. This was also to cause her to be that light that shines and reveals God and His righteousness to the nations around. God's call to them is to be a nation that will disciple other nations in the very ways of God. The fullness of this will be in the millennium when Jesus returns to rule and reign the nations from Jerusalem. But the promises of God comes with a condition, that she walks in wholehearted love and obedience to God. God is zealous for her to live out and to walk out her fullness. In His zeal for her, He comes against sin and wickedness in her that hinders her fullness. In His zeal, He sends discipline, sometimes even shakings and judgments. His desire through this is for her to turn away from sin and to return back to Him. We see this in the major and minor prophets. First, He sends prophets to warn them of their compromise and sin, and as voices they call the people to return. Hosea 11:8 reveals His zeal. "How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, Israel?" He goes on to say that His heart churns within Himself, His sympathy is stirred. Whenever Israel refuses to listen and take heed, He would send discipline. This can be in the form of floods, plight of locusts, or even military invasions. This is to cause her to turn back to Him. In His discipline, He's refining, He's purifying, so that a remnant will arise, ones that are holy, set apart for Himself. He will never destroy her completely. A remnant will arise because of His zeal for her. When she responds and turns to Him, He will return to her. God's zeal can also be seen in the way He fights for her against her enemies. He comes as Adonai Zevaot, the Lord of hosts, who comes with His army of hosts to fight against those who fight with her. In Isaiah 42:13, He says, "The Lord shall go forth like a mighty man. He shall stir up His zeal like a man of war. He shall cry out, yes, shout aloud. He shall prevail against His enemies." Zechariah 14, we see the nations come against her in the end times. The city will be taken, the houses defiled, the women ravished. Half the city will go into captivity, but there will be a remnant. In His zeal for her and her fullness, He gives Himself no rest. Isaiah 62 verse 1 says, "For Zion's sake I will not hold my peace. For Jerusalem's sake I will not rest until her righteousness goes forth as brightness, and her salvation as a lamp that burns." He calls us His people to give Him no rest as well, standing on the wall of Jerusalem, crying out to Him day and night for her fullness. As His people, we want to know God's heart for Israel. Just as He's zealous for her, we too want to have that same zeal as Paul for his brethren. God is zealous for Zion. Can we see His zeal for Israel? Let us catch His zeal so that we too can agree with God's heart and for her fullness.